This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from People Forward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self. Hey everyone. This is going to be one of those conversations that there are aspects of it that seem almost too simple or too common sense oriented, if you will. But I think it's helpful to go back and reconnect to things that are so impactful if we are going to have authentic relationships, if we're going to have workplace cultures that are win-win where people thrive. We have to come back to some really key principles. And that's exactly the conversation that I had with Brad Englert. He is an author, an advisor, a technologist with over 40 years of experience in both private and public sectors. And we talk about his recent book, Spheres of Influence, How to Create and Nurture Authentic Business Relationships. And walking through, you're going to want to listen for kind of 3 key principles that we can put into play with our different spheres of influence. And he talks about internal spheres of influence within our organization and things that we probably neglect when it comes to our leader. And he also talks about the sphere of influence externally, so customers, suppliers. And I will say a lot of these principles can also cross over into our personal lives as well. So it doesn't matter what your role is in an organization, we can all use these principles to strengthen relationships, build and nurture authentic relationships, and just have a greater impact. So listen for those things. And you're also going to want to make sure to go check out the episode show page, because Brad is including several different free resources that goes along with the book that you'll want to take advantage of and check out. Take a listen. All right, Brad, I am really looking forward to just having a geek out session with you on, culture change. And also we're going to talk about your new book, Spheres of Influence, and how we leverage the power of building and nurturing authentic relationships, which is just all speaking my love language and near and dear to my heart. So thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
So we're going to dig into your book, and congratulations on it, by the way. But before we do that, I want to have you talk a little bit about your path to get here and how that is influencing the work you're doing today and your book.
Well, I went to graduate school at the University of Texas at Austin, and doing that, I got interested in the use of computers in government. And I was not technical. I have a liberal arts undergrad degree, and my graduate degree is in public affairs. But I wanted to join a firm that could teach me the technical side. And I joined Arthur Andersen, which became Andersen Consulting, which became Accenture. And I was with the firm for 22 years. And from day one, they taught us about the importance of building relationships. And the people you might be working with day one could be your customer one day, or hire you one day, or a peer of yours. As it turned out, after I retired from Accenture, I took a couple of years off to remodel a home. I hired someone. I was the project manager. And the University of Texas called and said, the president wants an IT strategy. He wants someone from outside the university who knows higher ed. Well, my practice area was higher ed. So I worked at Ohio State, Columbia, Michigan, Vanderbilt, big publics, big privates. And so our week pro bono, so they're too cheap to pay for my parking or dry cleaning because that's higher ed. And this was in October. By March that year, I was half-time. By June, I was full-time, and I served as a chief information officer for 8 years. So it was a slippery slope. My wife said she knew I'd do that. I said, guys are stupid. You need to tell me when I do something like that. But at the university, I inherited a troubled organization, and they were kind of rewarded for heroics and fire drill, responding to fire drills. And I really wanted to change the culture of central IT into a customer service orientation. And the place we started were articulating the values that we wanted to have as an organization. And those values were what the campus said they wanted, which was truthfulness, integrity, caring about their success. And I had another value, which was family first. In Austin, Texas, I cannot compete with Facebook, Google, Dell Computer, all these startups, but I can offer my staff an 8-hour day and, balance in life. And I tried to model those behaviors. So every year I would mentor 2 or 3 people for the past 40 years, but that doesn't scale very well. And I wanted to get some of my stories that I shared with my mentees on paper so I could share it more widely. And I started, after I retired the second time, started on the book and finished it up in March of this year. So, but it was really the idea of how can I can't clone myself, so how can I help more people, especially early in their career, learn some techniques that they don't teach in business school.
I love all that. And I love you had to retire twice, right?
I'm going to get it better this time.
Well, and you said something that was really important right there that, they don't teach this stuff in business school. And I think that is really, really important because whether someone gets, a business degree or even honestly, like certificates sometimes in leadership, I mean, you can go back for the past several years, Harvard Business Review has done countless articles on how our traditional leadership executive education is backwards and that we're teaching strategy and we're teaching operations and we're teaching finance, but we need to actually be teaching what once upon a time were called soft skills, which I hate that term and are now
me too.
Right? Because they're power skills and they're essential skills, but it's self-awareness. It is interpersonal communication. It is all of those things that allow us to build and nurture authentic relationships that are cornerstones to our effectiveness, are cornerstones to culture that are not soft in any way, shape, or form, but they're messy and they're hard. And so it's like, oh, let's just teach all this other stuff. And we wonder why we have, in some cases, the leadership crisis, in other cases, it just kind of depends.
Well, the good news is you don't have to be born with this ability. It is a learned skill and you just have to practice. And so as I step back from the manuscript, I asked myself, what are the common principles for all business relationships? So the inner sphere of influence is your boss, direct reports, executive leaders, and all your staff. You deal with them almost every day. And then you have the external sphere, customers, peers and influencers, and strategic vendor partners. All those relationships, you need to understand what their goals and aspirations are. It's a simple step, but sometimes you're scared to ask the boss what their goals and aspirations are. Customers love to talk about what their goals and aspirations are. How can you help them? And the second principle is set and manage expectations. I learned this better later in my career, to use my words. And my boss is not a mind reader. So my customers are not mind readers. So, just setting clearly what the expectations are and managing those going forward. Then the third is genuinely caring about their success. It's not a transaction. You genuinely care. And I had a professor who I had worked with 15 years prior. I met with him and I said, okay, give me some advice. He goes, get out of the office and tell them you give a damn. That was the best advice ever because you need to get out there and meet with your customers, meet with your staff, meet with your direct reports. Just get out of the office.
Yeah, 100%. Well, so let's dig into each of those because I do like you went through those kind of quickly, and for those of you that are listening, I think it's simple, but it's overlooked, right? A lot of times we think about like Stephen Covey, and I know you reference him in your book about it's the sphere of what we can control versus influence can't control, but you're really talking about from that relationship communication, that internal again and external. And so when you think about those 3 principles, walk me through pick a couple of the internal spheres of influence. So you talk about boss, which is very different than if I'm inside an organization, how I influence and build relationships with my direct leader is going to be different perhaps than a peer or, executive leaders or whatnot. So can you like walk through more tactically or tangibly what that looks like? If you go through those three principles, let's just take our boss. Almost everybody listening has a boss or has had a boss. Let's just take that one.
Well, you just have to ask, what are your goals and aspirations? What do you hope to achieve in the coming year? And then how can I help you get there? So in the consulting industry, it's very important to bill for your services in a timely way and collect the money. It's the lifeblood of the firm. So don't ever be late. If you're late, then you show up on a report, and then it shows up on the boss's name, shows up on a report. Same thing with time reports. In 22 years with the firm, I was never late with a time report. Why? Because it drives everything, including my reimbursement for expenses. Having your HR duties up to snuff, evaluating on time and coaching your employees, all those help your boss be successful. But I found sometimes people are afraid to ask, especially if they're new. But that's actually the best time to ask because, what do you have to lose?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that on multiple levels. And here's why is, we do a lot of work. So we believe everybody can show up as a leader, regardless of title or role. And your title or role does not make someone a leader. And obviously, if you have formal leadership responsibilities, you have a different level of attention and intention you have to give because of the influence you do have over culture and the employee experience. And so with that as a fundamental kind of foundation, if you think about so often when we are working with formal leaders, we are talking about, are you actually meeting with your people regularly, which is a mind-boggling how many people don't. And are you having those developmental conversations more than just on the annual review? And is this an ongoing dialogue, right? Which is super important for everyone, but especially even millennials and Gen Zs in the workplace. And so I think about that. How often, I couldn't tell you the last time somebody on my team asked me those questions, which is, an interesting dialogue. And so I think it's important. And what comes up for me is we do a lot of work. We leverage a lot of different tools. And one of the tools that we leverage is from the Arbinger Institute, and it's their outward mindset model, which is basically, regardless of who you are interacting with, you put on this outward mindset lens where you are paying keen attention to the impact you're having on other people. And you start to get curious about and ask other people, whether they're your leader or whether they're a peer or a customer, is understanding what are their needs, objectives, and challenges. And then in light of that, you go, okay, well, how could I adjust my efforts to be more helpful? And so I love that you're like, you're basically asking it, and then you're like, how can I be helpful for you? And I think about formal leaders. I always tell teams they're a person too who has all kinds of challenges and things that are on their plate that maybe you're not privy to, but you need to understand they're a human being too, and they're trying to juggle all this. So maybe treat them like a human or give them some grace or, those types of things. So I appreciate that because I don't think it's done that much.
It's surprising. At the university, I had 7 direct reports. I would always meet with them in their office. I didn't make them come to the ivory tower. Now, why would I do that? Because one, I'm crossing campus and bumping into people and either my employees or my customers, and I'm being visible. Number 2, their staff see me come to their boss and show respect. And there's a little bit of flying the flag, but every week I'm meeting with them and it's just like clockwork. And when I started with the organization, I asked, what's going well? What's not going well? What can we change? What are your career aspirations? Do you want to be the CIO someday? If yes, I'll put you in an interim role when I'm on vacation. If no, I understand. You love to be an engineer. Good. But just having that dialogue, and you're right, it's not once a year at the annual review. For me, it was a weekly meeting.
Well, yeah, and obviously with direct reports, hopefully, again, people who do have that formal responsibility are having those conversations. But, I think about, we always talk about, if you lead others, whether it's formally or informally, like mentoring, training, there's all ways that we can, lead others within an organization without the role. But also I always talk about leading sideways and leading up, right? When you have peers and you have colleagues elsewhere, you have your leader, and then you might have a leader above you. And question we get a lot is, well, how do I lead up, or how do I manage up when my leader XYZ? And so I love that, you're thinking about just asking these questions, have a human dialogue, because if we're not asking those questions, our brains are filling it in with some kind of story we've made up, right?
Exactly. Well, a couple of phrases I use throughout the book are use your words and people are not mind readers. So you have to, if you're struggling with something, talk about it. And your staff cannot read your mind.
It's so elementary, but I was laughing when I read that, because I feel like I hear myself a lot say, use your words. Like, there's that whole, like, assuming makes an ass out of you and me, but there's something to be said for that phrase that's been around for a long time, because what I hear, well, I shouldn't have to. Well, we just had an episode that launched today as we're recording this with somebody named Matt Tate. And one of the things that he talks about his role as the CEO of a company is he's actually chief reminding officer, that you have to remind people over and over about the values, about the purpose, about the strategy, about where you're going. And so I think about that, of we all could be that chief reminding officer of, we can't just assume I said it to him once and then therefore I shouldn't have to say it again. It's like, no, we are in such a disruptive world that is constantly competing for our attention, that use your words, and don't assume stuff. Don't assume stuff of your colleagues. Don't assume stuff of your leader. Don't assume stuff of your customers. So I'm 100% on board. So that's an example of the internal, right, sphere of influence, talking about how do you, kind of common sense, but we don't do it, ask these questions of your leader. You'd probably see how quickly that relationship strengthens. Talk to us about one of the external spheres of influence, and again, how you would walk through that process with them and the difference you've seen it make.
Well, I'll talk about the second principle, which is set and manage expectations. And I had a customer who had a troubled transformation project, multi-year, and they asked me to be the lead of that project. And I said, you have all the pieces to be successful here. I'm happy to come help. However, this was in October. I was meeting with the provost and the chief financial officer, and I said, next summer, I have a vacation planned to go to Australia. I was supposed to go last year for my 25th high school reunion. I was an exchange student, and I canceled it due to work. Well, I have the plane tickets. We have passports for the boys. I got to take this vacation. And they said, well, sure. Yeah, not a problem. 3-week vacation. So we get to May, and we have our monthly meeting with the president. And I said, Mr. President, just want to remind you, as I did the last 3 months, that I'll be going on vacation in June. Diane will be in charge. I'll be gone for 3 weeks. And his hand started shaking. And I'm in slow motion canceling my vacation. Whoa! And the CFO and provost said, wait, Brad, hold on. Mr. President, when Brad joined us in October, he talked about this long planned vacation. He says it's a good time to be away. It was. Diane will be in charge. We should uphold our commitment. So the customer defended my vacation. Went to Australia, had a great time, came back to the project. Diane did a fabulous job. And so 10 years later, I'm having dinner with the chief financial officer and his spouse and my wife and I, and we talked about this story. And he goes, Brad, we were scared to death. They were scared to death, but they upheld their commitment. It was like to have a customer defend my vacation. That never happened before, but I just got better at setting and managing expectations.
Yeah. Well, and I think that as I'm listening to you, what I is coming up for me is that when we set and manage expectations, whether it's externally or internally, but I think that it goes hand in hand with being really clear about and being effective at having healthy boundaries. Because like when you talk about, hey, I'm going to be on vacation, in your head, oh my gosh, I'm going to cancel. I hear this on the daily, right? People don't unplug, right? They don't set it out of office, or if they set it out of office, it's a bunch of crap because they're still checking email and they're like, well, I'm going to be more stressed, but all of the data on burnout. And it's like, if you do not have this, and then you talk to them, well, I'm not really present when I'm at home with my family. I'm, checking emails and stuff. And it's like, well, what message does that send to them? And so we've created this unsustainable societal norm in so many cases, not everywhere, but in so many cases where it's just become don't unplug, don't have boundaries, don't advocate for yourself. And I think that's really a slippery slope because people are fried. It's not helping with, mental health epidemic, and it sets an unsustainable tone for the culture versus like, hey, like, we close our offices on XYZ date, or here we go, or people being mindful of, now remember, we're going to be gone, or no one's going to be available, or I'm going to be out, but this person is. Because if we don't honor those, and it's something so simple, but if you have a deliverable, you have something coming up, and just making sure everyone is on the same page and they can kind of calm that, oh, what if you're not available? Like again, not every industry there. If you're in healthcare, if you're in other industries, if your safety is a huge deal. Yes, there are life or death things, but like for what we do, like there's no such thing as a leadership crisis where like you need 911 for a week. Like you'll be okay, right? Like we can set you up for success, and I think that is super important. So that's principle number 2 in the external sphere. Talk to us about principle number 3 and give us an example on the external sphere.
So number 3 is genuinely caring about their success. And there was a vice provost, a peer of mine, who wanted to change the way courses were taught from the traditional lecture to have the lectures on video and have more interaction in the classroom. Well, in order to make that change for 52,000 students and 4,000 faculty, we needed better technology. We had an old, clunky learning management system that was not secure with student email. And she said, can we get a better tool? And I said, well, sure. And the students thought the old system was clunky and slow, and we changed some equipment. It was clunky and faster. But we had students and faculty evaluate 10 different learning management systems. They picked one that was written for the cloud. So it's new generation technology, very secure, using learning technology standards. So you could just plug tools in hours securely, which we couldn't do with the other. And when we took the recommendation to the president and the leadership, the president said, well, what do the faculty and students think? Well, sir, they unanimously endorsed this decision. Well, we're doing it. And so her organization, the vice provost, who worked with faculty in transitioning to this new capability, and my team, we just worked seamlessly to help with this change that affected everybody, basically. It took 2 years to do the transition. Some classes are only taught once every 2 years. And at the end, an email came from all the contacts in the schools and colleges to the president, and it was the vice provost and I were copied on it. And I just went like this. It's like, oh, I'm going to get fired. And it was the most thankful email to that both our organizations were so easy to work with. And I was able to work with our vendor who was able to change things because we're so big. They had never faced it before. And we delivered what was needed to make the transformation. It's called course transformation. And the people in the schools and colleges said, this sounds like a kind of an arcane thing, but it affects everybody. And the fact that we had the support and even some laughs and, fun along the way, it was the best implementation ever. But it was just reaching out to my peer, helping her meet a business need, and then our organizations working hand in hand and it being recognized. That are pretty cool. But we really cared about their success.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, it seems so like it should be so elementary or common sense. But what I observe with so many organizations that we work with when there's struggle, it is they're not caring about someone else's success. They have more of that inward myopic mindset where my vantage point is no, it's my team or my project or my resources and whatnot versus looking at the company as a whole or looking at creating a win-win. And it happens way, way, way more than we realize. I literally was just talking to a new client the other day, and they only have a couple locations. And just with that, they're struggling to operate as like one company. And then we have clients with, 26 locations, and it's trying to operate in one manner versus, 26 different businesses basically. And you hear this all the time, right? We're trying to operate as like one cohesive organization. And you can't do that if you're not caring about other people's success. You can't do that if you're not getting your vantage point beyond yourself and looking at those spheres around you, right? Internal and external for those relationships. So I think that's so critical. So so everyone listening, I want to do just a pause for a second because we've gone through them kind of like fast in the beginning of walkthrough. So just to like summarize, so we've got your internal spheres of influence within the organization, right? All of the people that you're working with. You've got the external spheres of influence. So anyone that, customers, suppliers, et cetera. And within all of those relationships, Brad, just walk us through again, what are the three principles that if we put into play in every single one of those relationships, we're going to be far more effective?
Take any relationship, meet one-on-one, and ask what their goals and aspirations are. And then talk about how can you help them achieve that, or maybe not. Sometimes I can't help a customer, but I know someone who can. And that's almost as valuable because down the road, they may say, okay, you couldn't help me there, but you can help me here. Setting and managing expectations. You talked about common sense. One of the reviewers of the manuscript said, Brad, this is just common sense, but a lot of people don't have common sense.
That's true. That's true.
So I thought, we're not going to Mars here, it's just something you can practice. And then, caring. I've had vendors who didn't care. So that original archaic learning management system vendor only showed up once a year for their money. And it was always 10% more than the year prior. They were terrible. They didn't care. They didn't see how you doing. We're one of their largest customers on the planet. And they just didn't care. And so they were replaced with a company that really did care. And, it's been 10 years of success with that company. So, the cost of not caring is greater than that. I had a customer who had all this turnover in their customer base. So they were losing 50% of their customers. It's like, well, what does your sales team know about the customers? Well, they didn't know anything about the customer. And so they had no stickiness, no traction. And so they were running numbers, but it was very inefficient just by telling the team, okay, you need to go out and meet with these people and understand what they need. And then, come back. All of a sudden they had 80% retention after a year. Well, guess what? That saved them a lot of money. And with the firm, 80-90% of our customers are repeat customers. Well, why? Because you deliver what you say you're going to deliver. You know what they want, and you make sure they're successful. If they're successful, you'll be successful.
Yeah. And I love that you're, people reviewing your manuscript are like, isn't this common sense? But I even think with a lot of the work we do, we'll say, look, a lot of this stuff is probably stuff you've learned somewhere else or you intuitively know, or it is common sense, but we get disconnected from it. We forget about this stuff and so it's helpful to get reminded sometimes back to, oh yeah, it should be common sense, or here's the tools, or here's simple practices.
Back to your comment about being on all the time. In IT, you could be on 24/7. I mean, any job you could be. And what I tried to do as part of our values is say, well, if family's first, then you don't work 24 hours a day. And I wrote a blog once a week for 8 years, a weekly blog. It went out to 330 people in my organization and about 300 other people interested in IT at UT. Well, that was a place where I could talk about the values and the expectations. And I had several times a year, if you're sick, don't come to work. Don't be a hero. We have 330 people who will cover for you. If you need to go to a school play, if you need to go to the doctor, go to the doctor, go to the school play. We have 330 people to cover for you. Go on vacation. Do not answer email 24/7. And then I, as a leader, would model that behavior. I would not send an email at 10 at night. I may think about it, but I wouldn't because I needed to model that. And I needed to, go to training, take my training. I needed to take my vacations. You had to walk the walk.
Oh, 100%. And I think, every organization is going to be different. So like I will talk to I was talking to one of the leaders that I'm working with a couple of weeks ago and said, okay, I get that here's the deal. You can hit schedule email and send it later or whatever. Or on our team, we always try to honor what we call people's power hours. And so like if someone's having a week or they've got stuff going on or things in their life that they need to take care of. And again, we make sure our customers are taken care of and meetings that are critical, but a lot of what we do, there's a lot of room and flexibility of when you can get that stuff done. And so it's having that understanding, or I will say, look, I was not feeling well earlier this week. And so I now have catch up that I'm going to do on the weekend because of that, just because I don't. So if you see me slacking over the weekend, don't answer it, or I'll say when you're back, like know that I'm working. I'm not expecting anybody to, it's just, that's what I need to do to get caught up. Or you know what? I needed to take a nap this afternoon. I wasn't feeling good. So guess what? Later tonight. But it's having that open dialogue so that you are managing those expectations where people don't think, oh gosh, the boss is doing it. Now it's an unwritten rule that I have to constantly be on. It's like, no.
Everyone's watching. So
yeah. So I love it. So, and I think, if we just think about, am I clear about, do I understand the needs of my colleagues? And I will say, as I'm listening to this, it's like, this is also like, do I understand the needs of my friends or my kids, or are we having those conversations? Am I managing expectations with them? And do I actually care about their success? I mean, if we put all those three in practice, I get why, it's authentic relationships, because we do things via relationship. I'm far more willing to give you grace. I'm far less likely to create a story. I'm far more likely to want to pitch in and help out when I have that relationship with you versus, or, think about people who are loyal to whoever their vendor, supplier, whatnot is, because it's like, no, they know me. And, I'm not going to switch just because it's a price change or whatever. Like there's a relationship that's built and I'm going to honor that. And I think sometimes we take that for granted. So I just appreciate you bringing us back to that. And especially for people, because I know your book is geared towards people who are earlier in their career, but anybody at any stage can be reminded of these things. Because I do think that even sometimes the younger generations, we hear all the stats, they're struggling with communication skills and relationship building just because of the nature of the world that they've been in. Again, every generation gets shaped, and it's like, oh, maybe there's something to be said for really nurturing those relationship skills in a methodical but deliberate way. So I'm very appreciative of that. So,
well, someone asked me, where do I start? And it's like, start with one. Start with your boss. Or if you're a manager, start with your direct reports. You don't have to solve all the world's problems at once.
Yeah, just build the habit of walking through those three principles. Understand, right? Understand what their needs are, manage your expectations, and care about their success. If you get that with your one person, your leader, or your people within your span of care, yeah, build from there. I think that's, otherwise people can't get off go.
So I had relationships with peers in the university, usually assistant deans and vice provosts who were over IT in their areas. And I would meet with them and just say, I would always have an agenda. Here's some projects that are coming. I used to joke that I irritate everybody at least twice a year. We moved new learning management system. We moved to voice over IP for the phones. We bothered everybody. But it would give them an opportunity to give me feedback. How's my organization doing? Things I could do better. Rumors. I would hear rumors. One of my peers said, Brad, I heard a rumor that you don't have enough diesel in the generators for the data center to run. Well, that's a good rumor. I'll go check. Turned out the generators run on natural gas. So, it was a great rumor, but it was totally unfounded. But I was able to nip it in the bud just by getting back to my peer and say, you can tell them it's okay. I would also ask my direct reports to meet with their peers. And one of my direct reports reminded me of a story that I forgot about. And she said, I'll never forget you. You ordered me to go meet with this IT person in computer science. I thought you're crazy. They hate us. Why would I go meet with her? I said, well, we want to have them in the tent, not outside throwing rocks at us. And in fairness, the organization had some bad behavior in the past that tainted that relationship. So I said, just go meet once a month, see how things are going. And as we slowly got better over about 9 months, more predictable, more customer oriented, that IT person became an advocate for us. And even better, not only an advocate, but her department chair, her boss, who was not happy with bad behavior from the past, became an advocate for us. So that doesn't happen if you're sitting in your office.
No, yeah, you're going to advocate for people that you have that relationship with again, and I just think we overlook that so much. So totally get it. So speaking of, so I'm going to kind of shift gears a little bit, only because, when I talk about, if we're not building relationships, in the absence of data, our brains fill it in with story. And as human beings, we make up stories to make sense of our experiences. It's how we're wired. And one of the things that I'm kind of obsessed with is normalizing the messiness of being human, and the fact that it is a human experience for us to make up stories. And one of the areas that we make up stories is about ourselves, and we get in our own way. And so, if I'm not reaching out to somebody, or I'm like, oh, my boss is like, oh, I can't do that, or my executive leader, I can't, find out what they need and ask those questions because they'll think whatever of me. We start to hold ourselves back and keep ourselves very small in the interest of being safe. And no matter how much work we've done on ourselves, what I've learned is that we all do this to some extent. And so I know you've been on this earth a long time. You've retired twice. But what I would love for you to share, Brad, is, in spite of all of that, what is a self-limiting story that you still tell yourself sometimes? And when it shows up, how do you move beyond it so that you can still show up as a leader in your life and have the impact that you want to have?
Well, I enjoyed the work I did, and sometimes I got over enthusiastic about it. And the feedback, and this is in the book, I had several 360-degree evaluations in my career. And one is, I need to listen more than I talk. So I learned the art of biting my tongue all the time. Do not be the first to come up, and patience. It's like sometimes things just work themselves out if you're more patient. Maybe you should understand what the problem really is. But, early in my career, I'd rush headlong into it, trying to solve it before really understanding what it was. So I got better at slowing down, and I got better at biting my tongue and listening. But I still struggle with that because I'm excited and I want, it's fun and blah, blah, blah.
Well, yeah. And a lot of times when my experience when people have that, it could be but I add value by having the answers, or I'm supposed to have the answers, or I'm supposed to fix things, or whatever it is. When you recognize, wait a second, maybe holding back, maybe listening more would serve me and others better here. So I appreciate that. All right. Are you ready for quick questions?
Sure.
All right. Brad, fill in the blank. Living authentically is?
Being yourself.
Yes. Everyone else is taken, right? You might as well just be here. There you go.
And you know yourself pretty well. So.
Right? When the world is presenting an opening, but you don't feel like showing up as a leader, what do you do?
I seek help from others. Might be a peer, might be a direct report, might be a friend, a spouse, but I look for help.
Nice. That's a huge sign of strength. I love that. What is something people would be surprised to know about you?
I have Australian family. They're not really my family, but I lived with three families 52 years ago in Australia. And my family and I have been back 4 times over the last 25 years and have stayed in touch with 2 of the 3 families. And we were just there a month ago, and we just had so much fun because I was 17. I was in high school, and my Australian brother is, we're the same age, and we just laughed so hard. When I was there 10 years ago, my Australian mom said, I let her know that I was chief information officer at the University of Texas at Austin. She looked up at me and said, I didn't think you're that smart.
Only family, whether blood or not, can be that real with us, right?
I was 17 when
Oh my God.
I went to college.
I love that. I love that you're still connected. That's amazing. That's awesome.
So, I think just staying close to them, it's really been fun.
Yeah, for sure. All right, what's your favorite go-to movie?
Oh, it's got to be Casablanca, especially in the end.
That's a classic.
It has romance. It has I love that.
Yeah, for sure. What is something you can't live without?
Family.
Nice. What is something in your ordinary daily life that makes your heart happy?
Doing podcasts like this. I love sharing what I've learned over the years, and I love mentoring. This is fun.
That's awesome. And then what are you grateful for right now?
I would say I would go back to family.
Love that. Your blood, your marriage, and your Australian family, and all the whole shebang, right?
The 2 boys who are adults now.
Love it. Love it. All right. One final closing question, Brad. If you could challenge leaders everywhere to practice this one behavior that would create more human workplaces and equip everyone to show up as a leader, what would that be?
Get out of the office and let them know you give a damn.
Bam. Simple, but profound. Awesome. Awesome. Well, Brad, thank you for, I love that, you were like retired twice and hey, I got more to share. I got more to give back. I love that you're looking at how can I help impart and mentor others, and that, I love the powerfulness but simplicity of your book, because I think we can overcomplicate relationship building. We can overcomplicate or underestimate, I guess, how important it is. And so I'm grateful for having this conversation, and thank you for the message and the work you're putting out in the world.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to peopleforwardnetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.